In 1975, Muhammad Ali was invited to give a speech at a Harvard graduation ceremony. And so during his speech, he was asked to read a poem, because of course Muhammad Ali was also a great poet as well as being a great boxer. Now we know, of course, that, as Brother Asim mentioned at the beginning, that Donald Trump is a great fan of poetry because of, the snake. And it's in fact a repurposing of a poem that had nothing to do with anti-immigration. Oscar Brown, the author of the Snake song, was not a poet, and his song had nothing to do with anti-immigration. It was a repurposing of that song to an anti-immigration poem. What made Muhammad Ali's poem was not this the genius nature of the way that he stole the idea and repurposed a poem or a narrative into a poem. It was not that. Muhammad Ali, when he was asked in 1975 to read a poem at this graduation ceremony of these clever individuals, he composed and said perhaps the shortest poem in human history. The shortest poem in human history, made of 2 words and 2 syllables and 4 letters with a full rhyme. He said, me, we. That's it. And that's his poem. Muhammad Ali, 1975. Me, we. It is that sentiment of me, we, of myself and togetherness that is a motivational element, the factor, the stimulus, the impetus for all of these remarkable cases you see of rescuing. In any case of turmoil, whenever you have turmoil like a genocide or a mass murder or disturbance, social disturbance, you usually have 4 groups of people emerge in society. You have the perpetrators of that, you have the victims of that, you have the bystanders of that, and you have the rescuers of that. The rescuers are always the minority people, because it requires courage for you to break away from the mold and do something different than other people are doing, and to say something, and to be somebody different, to challenge the status quo. To be a rescuer is something remarkably unique. Muhammad Ali was saying, me, we, meaning myself and you, myself and togetherness. We don't live on this planet alone. And Allah in the Quran, He says, subhanahu wa ta'ala, وَكَذَلِكَ جَعَلْنَاكُمْ أُمَّةً وَسَطًا لِتَكُونِ الشُّهَدَاءَ عَلَى النَّاسِ. We made you a middle nation, so you would be witnesses over the people. We do not live alone, isolated. We live together in communities. And it is in that community spirit. If you look, for example, what happened in Bosnia yesterday, we reflected back on those horrendous days of rape and mass murder and genocide and killing and indifference and the most severe of cruelty. We looked back on that yesterday. There was in Bosnia the element of the kumki satu, if I remember, and that was in fact a Turkish word for neighborhood in Bosnia, Turkish word for neighborhood. And in Bosnia, in fact, you had far fewer cases of people who would break from the mold and decide to rescue it, but you still had them nevertheless. You had small cases of individuals who tried to do something to rescue people who were suffering, who were victims of injustice and killing and mass murder and rape and everything else. In the Holocaust, in Albania, you had examples of the Bisa. The Bisa was an ethnic and ethical code of fulfilling the rights of others, the Bisa. And so Muslims of Albania, for example, when the Jews came as refugees into Tirana, the capital of Albania, they moved them out into the rural areas, the countryside, so they could find safety away from the Nazis. They did something to rescue people, to save the lives of others. In Rwanda, amazing, 1994, the genocide in Rwanda, up to 1 million people killed in 90 days. Hutus on the run, on a hunt for Tutsis. But the Muslims were like 4%, 3% of that country. But they realized, hold on, we don't live alone. We have a human, Muslim, Islamic, social responsibility to be there for others, to look out for others. And so amazing, in the first case you had the Kim Kisatu, you had the the case of the Bisa in Albania, and in this case you had Tadhiyya. Mufti Salih Habisama in Rwanda gave this call to all the Muslims, in all the mosques, in the radio stations. Your role today, when you're seeing something as horrendous as this campaign of torture, of execution, of lynching, hacking to death, mass rape, mass murder, is to remember that you're a Muslim. And when you're a Muslim, you have a choice. Either you would be on the side of dhulm and injustice, and that is وَضْعُ الشَّيْء فِي غَيْرِ مَوْضِعِهِ, that is to place something that doesn't belong there. Or you have a choice to be on the other side, on the side of those who are thinking about akhirah, number one, Allah, divine accountability. Allah will ask all of us, what did we do in that situation? But then to also remember that we have human beings living amongst us. Human beings, victims. Whether they're Jewish people in the ghettos, or whether they're Tutsis on the run from the Hutus, right? They are human beings and we have responsibility towards them. And Allah made us an ummah of witnessing unto others. Now, to be a witness, of course, does not mean that you're passive. It's an active and activated response to be a witness unto others. That means you would try and put yourself, number one, empathetically in that person's situation. What does it mean to be that person? Perspective taking. But more important than that, of course, because we don't always get it right in that respect, is to try and alleviate that person's suffering, to alleviate that person's troubles and problems. In the life of our Prophet ﷺ, he was 20 years old in Mecca. When a man came, this man was from a tribe that was not important. It was an unimportant, it was a lower tribe. And so he came along and he had this, he had this transaction with somebody, and the person said, come back after the Hajj season and then I will give you the money. And so the man said, okay, that's fair enough, sounds good. And so he comes back after Hajj season and he goes to the man and he says to him, come back later. And so he waited still for them for later. And then he says the same thing. And it went on. Until the man was isolated by himself, thinking, well, I need my money. But I'm not getting my money back. And so there was a decision that was made. This is why when I look at all of you amazing, great people, Allah Akbar, because this is a conscious decision you made. This is tawfiq from Allah, your juhud, your effort, conscious decision you made. This small group of people gathered in one home, and our Prophet was amongst them, and he was 20 years old. Imagine 20 years old, 20 years before the beginning of his nubuwwah. And he said later on, he described it himself, he said, لَقَدْ شَهِدْتُ في دار Abdullah ibn Juda'an hilfan. I was laqad shahidtu, meaning I saw or even I witnessed, I was participant too. I was involved in the home of this man Abdullah ibn Juda'an, hilfan, like a pact, a treaty, an alliance. And he said that ما أحب أن لي به حمر النعم. And if I was given a choice between being in that home and entering amongst this alliance amongst the people, or having a herd of red camels, I would choose to be in that room. وَلَأُدْعَ بِهِ فِي الْإِسْلَامِ لَأَجَبْتُ. Or كما قال, and he said, if I was called to that same pact, that same bond making, that same sense of togetherness, we, today in Islam, I would respond to that. And so if you think, subhanallah, here's our Prophet telling us, and even then he says, تحالفوا وترد الفضول إلى أهلها وألا يعز ظالم مظلوما. He says, go and fulfill the pacts, make these alliances with people, make these good alliances where your cause is the same, where you both have a concern for the wrongdoing unto others. Make those good alliances. Think strategically, think practically. Because if you don't do that, then the ones who are wrongdoers, oppressors, will always have an ascendancy, always have a strength over those who are wronged. And remember, we're not the only victims in this. Allah made us a great ummah. And the great ummah has a great role, has a great task. Allah made us an ummah of rahmah, an ummah of mercy. All of this is being described, of the dhulm, of the torture, of the oppression, of the waterboarding, all of this is a complete opposite of everything we stand for as Muslims. Everything our Prophet brought for us. Allah describes, وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا رَحْمًا لِلْعَالَمِينَ. We send you as a rahmah for all the alameen. If He's a rahmah for all the alameen, this completely does away with everything to do with rahmah. And it is our job, therefore, as Muslims to bring back, to try and restore. When the people would gather in Munich or places, small groups of people like Sophia Scholl and the White Rose Movement and small others, Albania, Rwanda, it was because they had in their minds, whatever is happening is crazy. Whatever is happening is horrendous, terrible, sinister, evil. But we have a role as Muslims, not to be the perpetrators, nor to be the victims and be in the state of victimhood, but to be the rescuers and not to be the bystanders. May Allah grant all of us strength. May we continue coming to these places. I feel so happy. I feel as if I have the feeling. You imagine the Prophet in the house of Lateef Juda'an, you know, a few of them, and they're making this thing. This man who doesn't have his rights, he isn't getting his money. What can we do? And they did it together, and they put all their hands in perfume, and they made a mark on the Kaaba. It was like a way of saying we all support this man. If we have the same attitude, it would mean something. A man called Stéphane Hessel died in 2011. He wrote a book called Time for Outrage, Indignez-vous in French. And it was outrage over torture. He wrote the book at the age of 91. He died at the age of 93, if I remember. And it was like a last testament to humanity. Outrage over poverty is our concern. That people are poor is our concern. Outrage over racism is our concern. Outrage over abuse, torture, outrage over what's happening in Guantanamo, the wars, all of that is our concern. And he ends, in fact, like the brother was saying before me, Dr. Salman, reminded me of his words. His last line was, we call for a mass public uprising against the means of mass communication. That's what he says. That offer nothing but mass consumption as a prospect for our youth, general amnesia, and the outrageous competition of all against all. We'll just be at each other's throats, killing each other because we're concerned about money and these things. We have a greater purpose, a higher calling. May Allah allow all of us to fulfill it. Jazakallah khair.